Morning, church family. God is good, amen. I was asked to change the scripture reading this morning. It's actually Leviticus, verse 19. I'm going to read just the end of verse 10 and a little of 11. When you have it, say amen. I am the Lord your God. Ye should not steal.
Kept short and sweet. And when it's a last-minute change like that, thank you, Ken, for joining with me on that one. I am also changing the title a little bit here. In your bulletins, it says one thing, but the title for this morning actually is You Cannot Steal a Gift, hence the short little term. I don't know if you guys have ever been there. I don't know if it's ever felt to you like this, but imagine with me, you've left early on a Sunday morning, rushing off while the family's still pouring milk over their cereal. You remember that kind of morning, right? You've got stuff to do. Maybe the boss has called you in on the weekend. The car needs to get dropped off at the mechanic. You just have to go. As we come crawling home late that night, your spouse looks at you with that look. Did you just forget Stephanie's Little League game again? I couldn't leave, you say. Sorry, everybody else stayed late at work. I couldn't be the only one to go. And the Lord says, will you rob God? And you look at him and say, Lord, how have we robbed you? After 1 week at church, one of the elders pulls you aside and wants some feedback about a problem that they're having. They explain how Janice, one of the newly baptized deaconesses, just isn't working out in that department. I'm sure you've heard this kind of thing. The frustration in their voice is evident. And they finally ask, is there anything you think we should do about her? I mean, she's just not working out. Just last week, you overheard Janice mentioning to somebody else how exciting it is to be involved in things at church and how great it is to fellowship. And with an understanding nod and a slight smile, you say, I think you're probably right. I'm sure if we talk to the pastor, we can just be sure not to put her on the schedule anymore, or maybe we can suggest somebody else to take her place. We need to have people in that know what they're doing. I'm sure we can just let her go quietly. And the Lord says, will you rob God? And you look at God and say, Lord, how have we robbed you? I felt good after the sermon. I'd spent a lot of time on it, and it was obvious that people felt touched and blessed. There was even some people coming through line that had tears in their eyes. That's always a good sign, right? Then Mr. X, who I haven't seen in church for months, comes up with a pensive look on his face, and he sticks his hand out and says, Pastor, that was a great sermon. I love it when you preach. I get a big smile on my face, and I say, thank you. I'm really glad all the hard work that I put into that really meant something for you. And God looks at me, and he says, will you rob God? I say, Lord, how have I robbed you? Unfortunately, for us, all Exodus chapter 20, verse 15 says is, you shall not steal. 8th commandment, part of the ones that we'll get used to. We've heard them all the time. Thou shalt not steal. At first, it seems pretty cut and dry. Easy to understand. If it's not yours, don't take it. When somebody else's name is on the title, keep your hands off. If the commandment was written like a computer program, it would say something like, if owner equals not you, then don't touch. But of all the 10 commandments, it's the simple ones, the ones that we kind of assume are no-brainers, that seem to get us when we least expect it. The fact that the 8th commandment is so short and sweet is exactly why it's such a powerful command in the original language. The command in Hebrew is actually only 2 words, lo, tzadesh. The negative part of the verse there is the simple little word lo. And if you were to translate it literally, it would just say, not you shall steal. But that one little word at the beginning of it, lo, The word for not is a really strong emphasis. In that phrase, the verb that it's attached to steal, is given as an imperfect. I don't know how many of you guys are into English grammar and all this kind of stuff, but when the Hebrews would put the word lo next to an imperfect type of verb, that was a strong, strong command. It basically was saying, don't do this under any circumstances. It wasn't kind of a, oh, it's not a good idea, you probably shouldn't do this, it's not going to be good. It was, don't ever do this under any circumstances. And that usage of the word lo isn't confined to just Exodus in the first 10 commandments. It's the same thing in the Deuteronomy version, and it's even the same in Leviticus. Do not ever steal. So there's no question that God is giving a definitive command here. He says, don't steal it ever. But even as authoritative as that comes across, the power in that phrase is actually in what it doesn't say. If you notice, there's only the two words, not you shall steal. It doesn't tell you what. There's no direct object there. It doesn't say, thou shalt not steal this, or thou shalt not steal that, because then we'd have license to do anything, as long as we didn't do that. But the fact that there's no direct object makes this a universal command. So if you think about it, in two words, God is basically saying, don't ever steal anything at all. And that's where we slip up. Sure, maybe we're not dipping into the offering plate as it goes by or rummaging through the tithe envelopes, but aren't we still guilty of breaking that 8th commandment somehow? If you shall not steal can apply to more than just money and personal property, that means there's a deeper principle going on. I believe that we as Christians, there is a slew of unique temptations that are laid before us, all of which involve stealing. Sometimes we steal time, either exorbitant amounts of time from our loved ones or maybe even from the church. Maybe we steal the credit, preferring rather to pat ourselves on the back instead of bowing before the God that's really doing the work. Perhaps we're just stealing attention by pointing out to other people our own achievements instead of pointing up to God. But come on, you're saying, these are small things. Maybe I'm just not using my time wisely, or maybe I'm getting a little self-righteous or prideful. I haven't actually stolen anything from anybody, much less from God. Well, I have an idea to propose. What do you think about this? Does stealing take place in our hands when we take something, or does it first happen in the heart? I want you to check out Romans with me. Romans chapter 2. Paul's got a few interesting things to say here, and I'm going to read through. It's quite a few verses, but I really believe it gets to the heart of this, so bear with me. Read along Romans chapter 2, starting in verse 17. I'm going to be reading out of the New International Version, but whatever version you have, the point still comes across. Romans chapter 2, starting verse 17. Here it kind of sounds as if Paul is only speaking to the Jews, He uses the phrase a lot. He talks in Jewish language, circumcision, different things like that. I'm going to switch the noun, though. I want to insert something else in the place of the word Jews. And just let me know if you think it sounds right. Romans chapter 2, starting verse 17. Read along. Now you, if you call yourself a Christian, if you rely on the law and you brag about your relationship to God, if you know His will and approve of what is superior because you are instructed by the law, if you are convinced that you are a guide for the blind, a light for those in the dark, an instructor of the foolish, and a teacher of infants, because you have the law, the embodiment of knowledge and truth. Verse 21, then you who teach others, do you not teach yourself? You who preach against stealing, do you steal? Skipping to 23, you who brag about the law, do you dishonor God by breaking that law? And then Paul goes on in verse 25, He talks about circumcision and this connection with the law. He says, circumcision has no value, or circumcision has value if you observe the law, but if you break the law, you have become as though you had not been circumcised. If those who are not circumcised keep the law's requirements, will they not be regarded as though they were circumcised? The one who is not circumcised physically and yet obeys the law will condemn you, who even though you have the written code and circumcision are a lawbreaker. 28. A man is not a Christian if he is only one outwardly. Nor is circumcision merely outward and physical. No, a man is a Christian if he is one inwardly. And circumcision is circumcision of the heart, by the Spirit, not by the written code. Breaking any of the commandments starts in the heart first, not in the hands. If you can see what Paul's trying to talk about here, circumcision was a physical manifestation of the Jews saying, I am committed to the law, I am committed to God, I will do and I will stand for. And Paul's saying, you know what? If you've got that and you don't have the law, it's worthless. If you're doing the right stuff and you've still got things going on inside your heart that aren't really the same, it doesn't matter what you're doing. Maybe we aren't thieves outwardly, Maybe we don't rob banks. Maybe we don't hotwire cars or download illegal music off the internet. But do we rob God of his glory by pointing at ourselves? Do we steal the credit for things at work when it's going really well and we want everybody to know it? Do we spend more time getting stuff than we do on our knees? This kind of theft is a lot more subtle. It's a lot sneakier than shoplifting. But the attitude in the heart is actually the same. I want it, so I'll take it. This is at the heart of every thief, regardless of what it is that he steals. And if we're honest with ourselves, I can think that we've all acted on this feeling at some point in our lives. I want it, so I'll take it. The fact of the matter is that stealing happens in the heart, not in the hands. Man can only punish a thief. You can only throw a guy in prison for stealing a car because he's actually done it. He's actually taken in something that isn't his. But that's only because we can see the outward. We can only see the outward results of the inner corruption in man's heart. As I was studying through all this, I just had to ask myself the question, why do we do these things? What's the underlying problem here? If it's true that stealing happens in the heart, not in the hands, what's wrong with our heart? And can we do anything to fix it? There's something fundamental going on within us. Something deep that we wrestle with whenever we feel like we have to take something that isn't ours. We feel like there's something missing in our life that we need and we don't have. I don't know about you guys. I can honestly say I've never stolen anything in my life. And then I realize maybe I never got caught, or maybe I just didn't do it, but I really wanted to. I've walked through stores and I've seen lots of things, and I've looked around and there's no cameras, there's no people in the shop, there's nobody around to see me at all, and it would be so easy to slip it on in and walk on out. I'd never get caught, and I wanted to do it, but I didn't. Simply because I didn't want to risk the shoplifting, and I didn't want to get the slapped with the fines or the prison or whatever it could have been. There's physical, social reasons that kept me from doing it, but it doesn't mean I didn't want to do it. Something inside of us, something fundamental, still says, I want it. And sometimes we reach out and we take these things, the things that we feel we need to fill in the gap in our life. Maybe the gap is acknowledgement, Maybe it's love, maybe it's security. These are things that we want. But whatever it is, we feel the absence so strongly sometimes that we feel driven to the point of taking anything within our reach to fill the hole and make it stop feeling so empty. The whole thing is like inward focused, me, me, me. I need this, I want that. Get out of my way and give me what I want. But I want you to listen to what Paul says to it. You don't have to turn to this one. I'm going to read it to you. It's in Ephesians chapter 4. He says, "He who has been stealing must steal no longer, but must work, doing something useful with his own hands, that he may have something to share with those in need." Is he serious here? I mean, honestly, I'm asking the question. We can stop ourselves maybe from taking stuff, but can we stop ourselves from wanting to take stuff? Can we stop what's going on inside that says, I'm not gonna, but I really wish I could? Can we fix that kind of stuff? His answer is, don't steal anymore. Put yourself to work, get things, and give them away. You've got that emptiness inside. You want things, so the cure for that is to give it all away, whatever you can get. Does this make any sense? I think it does. I think Paul was onto something because he knew what it was like to want, to feel, and to realize that there was something broken inside. I don't know if any of you have ever read the book Les Miserables, or you've seen the movie maybe, or the musical or something. Forgive me if you have. I want to focus on one scene from this story that, to me, illustrates this point powerfully. The main character is a guy named Jean Valjean, who's just been released from prison, 18th century France, and he knows that as he's traveling these roads, poverty, facing him square in the face, poverty is going to destroy him like it's destroyed everybody else in that time. And as he goes to a village and knocks from door to door, everybody turns him away because he has to show on a piece of paper that he is a thief, that he was convicted, and that he was sentenced to 19 years hard labor. And every one of these people turns him away. Finally, he's about to sleep on the streets, and an old lady comes up and says, "You should try that house. They're not going to turn you away." So he walks up, bangs on the door, sticks the paper in the man's face, says, I can't read it, but I know what it says. It says, "I'm a convict. You need to know. But will you let me in?" The man's a priest. He looks at him and says, "Of course." He says, "No, can you read this? Do you know what it says?" And he's like, "Of course I can read it. Come on in." Warily, Valjean enters, sits down at the meal. And as they ask him about himself, and they say, what happened to you? What did you do? And the little sister of this priest is sitting there, and she's just quivering with fear, and she says, "What crime did you commit?" And he just kind of grins at her, says, "Maybe I killed somebody. Maybe I murdered someone in the village next to you." And she grabs and pulls herself back. And the priest leans over the table and looks at him and says, "Oh, well, maybe we're going to kill you." The guy looks at him. Valjean's like, "What is this, a joke? What do you mean?" He's like, "I don't know, but I think we're going to have to trust each other no matter what." He says, "All right, fine. I'm not a murderer. I just stole bread. I paid my time. I just need a place to stay tonight, and then I'll be on my way." And as he says this, he's fingering the silverware in his hand, wondering how much he can get on the street for it. That night, they go to bed, and Valjean sneaks out and is rummaging through all the drawers, gathering up all the silverware that he can find and stuffing it in a bag. And then he hears a door open and someone saying, "Is somebody out there?" Recognizing the priest's voice, he hides in a corner, hoping that he won't be seen. And suddenly in the dark, they stand face to face. Valjean feels terrible, but he reaches up with his hand and he hits the priest over the back of the head. And as the man crumples to the floor, he runs out the front door into the darkness. The next morning, scene opens, the priest is out in the garden, big cut on his forehead, and the little sister's on the side there with the empty cupboard drawers, and she's crying, saying, "What are we going to do? Why did you let this happen? Why did you even bring him inside?" And suddenly the police are at the front door, dragging a bedraggled Valjean up to the door. They said, "We caught this man running out of the village last night with a bag full of silver. He said you gave it to him, but obviously we know that's not possible." And the priest cuts him off and says, "Of course. Of course we gave it to him. What did you think? John Valjean, why did you not take the candlesticks that were 3,000 francs? Why did you leave them? We gave them to you as well." The police are shocked. They stand back, and they're like, you mean this guy's telling the truth? He says, of course. You think I would just let him walk out of here with my silverware? No. Release him. No other choice. The police let him go. They leave, and Valjean is left there, standing, his mouth slack, not realizing what's happened. And he looks at the priest and says, why are you doing this? And the priest steps right up into his face. He says, don't forget it. Don't you ever forget it. Jean Valjean, my brother, you no longer belong to evil. With this silver, I have bought your soul. I've ransomed you from fear and hatred. And now, I give you back to God. Valjean thought he knew what he needed out of life. He thought that the only way to get it was to take it. But it never really filled the holes. It never really satisfied the soul. And that day when he encountered God through that priest, he came face to face with the reality that what he really needed in life wasn't something that he could steal. It was something that he could only be given. The rest of his life was never the same. The story relays how he changed everything about himself. If stealing is truly a matter of the heart and not of the hands, then today what I want to challenge you with is to accept the gifts of love, to accept the grace that Jesus has offered you, but don't just hold on to it after that. You know, as Christians, we've accepted God's love, we've accepted the sacrifice, we understand things, we read the Bible, we come to church. But he says, don't just accept the gift, pass them on. You want to fix something that's inside of you. You know, you want to change something in your heart that's broken, something that says, I have to have all these things. And God says, I can change that. That's not something you can do. That's something I can do. And his prescription is to take what you've been given and to give it away. It's like a paradox, you know? The more you give away, the more you will receive. And I think that's why Paul says what he says in Ephesians. He who has been stealing must steal no longer, but must work, doing something useful with his hands, that he may have something to share with those in need. We as Christians, we have to fight these kind of temptations for stealing that face us all the time. It can come in so many forms, like we've said, time or pride. But if our energy is constantly focusing on passing on to our families, to our neighbors, to the world around us, the love that Jesus has given us, it's going to kill that need inside to fill the gaps. Stealing is a matter of the heart, not of the hands. But giving, on the other hand, is a matter of the heart and the hands. It will kill in us all desires to steal because our needs are being met. They're being filled every time we give. I want to challenge you today. Look at yourselves. I mean, I don't know your guys' lives. I don't know everything that happens to you during the week. I don't know what kind of opportunities the Lord gives you. But if there's anything in your Christian experience that you gain from these times in church or interacting with people here, if you get anything from those, I challenge you to pass it on this week to somebody, anybody. You start praying for this kind of stuff. You start saying, Lord, I want somebody to give what you've given me. You'll be amazed at who pops up in front of you. And it doesn't even have to be stuff that you make up. I mean, you know, you don't have to be there like, okay, Lord, I pray this, now I'm going to find somebody. He just makes it happen. And you don't have to wonder, is this the guy? You know. It's painfully obvious sometimes. So I want to challenge you this week. If you have something, if God has done something for you, if you feel something here that's happened at church, or if you've been given something, fix what's inside by passing it on. Today, it's my prayer that if the Lord turns to us, his followers, his Christians, his last day people, if he says, will you rob God? My prayer is that we can confidently turn to him and reply, Lord, no. Why would we ever want to rob you?